Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Islam and the News right here on ABN's Trinity channel. Today is Friday, February 3rd in the year of our Lord, 2017. And as usual, I have a lot of news stories here to share with you that you will not find or hear other places. So it's a blessing to have you here with us. And again, shows like this every single week and all the other new weekly shows are able to continue when you continue to support ABN and the Trinity channel. So we ask that you would continue to support ABN, whether that is a one-time gift or if you can sign up for a monthly pledge. Just call the numbers on the bottom of your screen to use a debit card, credit card, or EFT from checking or savings account. Even if you say, hey, $5 a month, $10 a month, right? I mean, that's what, a couple cups of coffee if you drink Starbucks or any other high-priced coffee outlet out there. So, but a little bit from a lot of people adds up, and that allows all these shows to continue. And if you haven't heard, these shows are not only available now through high-speed internet and through satellite throughout the world, but also on multiple platforms such as Roku and Amazon Fire Stick and Apple TV, and it just continues to grow. The Lord continues to open up more and more avenues for us to get these shows out to the world. And as you know, you will find and hear content here on ABN that you not hear anywhere else, because we have a heart for Muslims. We have a heart for all non-Christians, hoping that they would repent and put their trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. But at the same time, we don't sugarcoat stuff. You know, we're not worried about being politically correct, not offending people. It's better to get offended and end up in heaven than be happy and go to hell, some people say. People say, well, I believe this and it makes me happy. Well, that's fine. But if what you believe is wrong, then there are eternal consequences to that. And because we know we have the truth, Jesus said he is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. We know that if you don't believe in Jesus and who he truly is, which you find in the New Testament, then you have eternal consequences, again, to being wrong and getting what you justly deserve from a good and perfect and holy God, which is hell. But God, who is just and holy and will not let a guilty person go, is also rich in mercy. And he sent his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, to take on human flesh, to live under the law. The law didn't change. Jesus fulfilled it, but he also raised the bar even higher. And he died, and then he rose from the dead 3 days later in defeating death, defeating Satan. So it's a blessing to have you here. And again, please continue to share these shows with everyone else. Getting right into the news from Al-Alam, we have Trump says Iran put on notice, quote unquote, after ballistic missile test. Says Iran has been formally put on notice for firing a ballistic missile, should have been thankful for the terrible deal with the U.S. made with them. Trump said in a Twitter message Thursday morning, Iran was on its last legs and ready to collapse until the U.S. came along and gave it a lifeline in the form of the Iran deal, $150 billion. So Trump obviously is not happy about what they are doing. And it says here, U.S. sends Navy destroyer off Yemen coast as tensions rise with Iran. That is from Zero Hedge. It says, while there were some hopes President Trump would demilitarize U.S. presence in the Middle East, they are quickly getting dashed with every passing day. And following Trump's announcement last week, he would implement safety zones in Syria, which would boost U.S. troop presence in the region. On Friday, U.S. officials announced they had moved a Navy destroyer, the USS Cole, which in 2000 was infamously attacked by terrorists while on dock in Yemen's Aden Harbor, off the coast of Yemen to protect waterways from Houthi militia aligned with Iran, according to Reuters, citing heightened tension between Washington and Tehran. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the days and weeks ahead. We know that Trump is not a fan in whatsoever of Islamic terrorism or threats to the U.S., which he is trying to make great again. So we will see. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the days and weeks ahead. Moving on to another story from Al Alam, we have 2 bomb attacks hit Nigeria as officials blame Boko Haram. If you have never heard of Boko Haram, think of Al Qaeda, but a little bit different name, of course, and a little bit different part of the country. Throughout the world, there are different groups who consider themselves, okay, they say we are the so-and-so branch of Al-Qaeda. We are the so-and-so branch of ISIS. So they have a little bit different name, but it's basically, the same mentality, the same Islamic worldview, the jihadist mindset that is happening in other places of the world are happening in these other countries as well. So that is in Nigeria. And you can look up Boko Haram to find out more about it. But obviously, ISIS is the group who gets the most news headlines nowadays. And I have one here from Al Jazeera. It says, Turkey, U.S. coalition jets kill 47 ISIL fighters. Military says a total of 47 fighters killed in northern Syria in clashes and air raids in the past 24 hours. Turkish and U.S.-led coalition fighter jets have carried out bombing raids against ISIL position near Syria's Al-Bab, a town held by ISIL and besieged by Turkey-backed Syrian rebels for almost 2 months, according to a Turkish military statement. Now, from worldwatchmonitor.org, they're also talking about ISIS, but their headline is Cleaning Up Towns Free from IS, quote, erases evidence of their crimes. It says efforts to clear villages liberated from Islamic State are undermining the possibility of recording the atrocities to people and heritage committed there, according to a leading Iraqi aid worker. Dr. Sarah Ahmed, director of projects for the UK-based Foundation for Reconciliation and Relief in the Middle East, last month visited a number of towns and villages in the Nineveh Plains area around Mosul that had been home to thousands of Christians until Islamic State jihadists chased them out in the summer of 2014. So, obviously, ISIS is trying to erase history, and that is any history that they don't like or don't agree with. I've mentioned in Fridays in the past that they are destroying, images, statues that they consider as idols. But also, too, not only is it an idol, but if anything that backs up Jewish or Christian history, they want gone. So they will destroy it. Anything that does not back up their worldview, anything that does not back up what they believe should be right in every territory that they're in, they will destroy it. So it would be a good thing, like it says here, to go ahead and not clean up right away, but to get photographs, to take video, and this can be documented as a modern day Holocaust, so to speak. We have a lot of black and white pictures and videos of World War II. And of course, we don't know exactly how many people have been killed by ISIS at this point or how long this will continue. But this is obviously a major event in history that needs to be documented as well. So we hope that people are recording information and we are able to archive that for teaching future generations of what not to do. Here from independent.co.uk, I have Donald Trump appoints creationist college president to lead higher education reform task force. Jerry Falwell Jr. is president of the largest Christian university in the world. Jerry Falwell Jr., the head of the world's largest Christian college, where biblical creationism is taught alongside the theory of evolution, it is to lead Donald Trump's task force on higher education reform. Mr. Falwell, who was an early endorser of Mr. Trump and whose backing helped secure the vital support of evangelical Christians, has been mentioned as a possible candidate as education secretary. So that would be very interesting to see what happens if he does get that spot, because if you are not aware, here in the United States, many years ago, creationism was taken out of school curriculums. The Bible was taken out of schools. Prayer was taken out of schools. Yes, we actually did pray. I didn't, because I'm not that old, but there were people who prayed in school a number of years ago. The Bible's taken out, prayer's taken out, pretty much God is taken out from the curriculum, and then we see how the curriculum is nowadays, and of course the lives of students nowadays who are getting mainly this evolutionary explanation of how the world came to be and how you and I came to be. It's kind of from the goo to the zoo to you. You know, this slow process of evolution rather than creation. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens if Falwell does get that position and what that would do to school curriculums throughout the United States, especially public school curriculums. From the Christian Post, it says Trump promised to end IRS monitoring of pastor sermons introduced as bill in House. Members of Congress introduced legislation in the House and Senate on Wednesday that would restore the rights of churches and pastors to speak and advocate politically from the pulpit without fear of their tax-exempt status being revoked by the Internal Revenue Service. It has here a quote, says a preacher should not have to get permission from the IRS to be able to preach to their congregation, and what has been happening. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana said Wednesday during a press conference in the U.S. Capitol. So again, another thing that'll be interesting to see. A lot of pastors are worried about talking about political things, but you know, this whole separation of church and state, which I'm planning on mentioning a little bit later on here again, you know, people have a misconception about that, because the separation of church and state, the reason for that was so that the government would not influence the church. The government would not influence what, you know, pastors preach on and all that. It was not meant to separate it to where the church does not influence the government and the church does not influence society. The church should be influencing everybody, right? We should be sharing the gospel. We should be loving our neighbors as ourselves. So the separation of church and state was not to hinder churches. It was to hinder the government. So we will see if another news story that we need to stay on to figure out how this is going to go, especially with the presidency of Trump. And we're seeing all this stuff that he's doing just after being in office for a couple of weeks, definitely keeping a lot of promises that he said he would keep. Now, kind of a 180 from that, I have here from barenakedislam.com. It says California pastor under fire for telling the truth about Islam. Designated terrorist group CAIR, C-A-I-R, is worried that the pastor's so-called, quote, hate speech will force Muslims to stage even more hate crime hoaxes, such as writing, quote, USA on mosques, which Muslims consider an, quote, anti-Islam hate crime. Now, I have a video to share with you, so let's go ahead and play that video.
A Stockton pastor is being accused of using hate speech against Islam. Take a listen.
If you've never been out of this country and you've never been to a Muslim country, you don't understand how dark Islam is.
The sermon in question, taking place at Christian Life Center in Stockton as part of a series of talks during a week-long conference last week, had Pastor Nathaniel Haney's message about Islam striking a nerve, not just with the Muslim community, but even with members of his own church.
I have a lot of Muslim friends, people that I go to class with, and while listening to the pastor say this stuff about people that I love, that I respect, I felt like in a way that he was attacking me.
The Council on American Islamic Relations in Sacramento says hate crime incidents against Muslims have gone up drastically in the past year. And just in the last week, there have been 2 mosques vandalized in Davis and Roseville. The fear of this kind of speech is that it could incite more hate crime. Pastor Haney has not been available to comment on this. Church representatives not commenting on the sermon other than to say the church is inclusive of all. You know, vulgar messages appeared on the Islamic Center in Roseville, as we mentioned. This happened Tuesday night. Some too inappropriate to show were spray painted all around the Tarbiyah Institute. Others reading Muslims out and USA. Members of the center say they've received, though, an outpouring of support since the act of vandalism. They say, though, they're still worried for their safety. Police are calling the incident a hate crime. Officers will be stepping up patrols around the institute. And the FBI and Davis police officers searched a home in Davis yesterday in connection with the vandalism at the Davis Islamic Center last month. On January 23rd, surveillance video captured a woman puncturing bike tires, shattering windows, even putting bacon on door handles. Davis police are investigating this vandalism as a hate crime as well.
So, God bless that girl who was interviewed first for having Muslim friends and saying that she loves them. We love Muslims as well. That's why we want to share the gospel with them. We don't want them to end up in hell, which is exactly where they will end up if they don't repent and put their trust in Christ. But you'll notice that that girl was talking about her friends who she knows, right? She's talking about Muslims being people, rather than talking about Islam. So if she's not making the distinction there, if she hasn't studied Islam herself, then she's going to be just one more of the many people out there who let their Muslim neighbor or their Muslim friend or their Muslim coworker define Islam, right? If I have a neighbor who's Muslim, he lives a, clean life, decent life, he loves his kids, he takes care of his family, he goes to work, he pays his taxes, he says he loves American freedom, he loves the Constitution, it's like, okay, well, I can say, okay, well, I guess that's Islam. Well, no, your friend doesn't define Islam, right? Muhammad defined Islam 1,400 years ago. So if you, as a Muslim, say, hey, Tony, what does Christianity teach? What should I do if I become a Christian? If I say, okay, well, just go look at my neighbor, he says he's a Christian, so just look at him, see what he does, and just do what he does. That's going to be a disservice in multiple ways. Number one, I am pointing you to an imperfect person, my neighbor, who is, maybe a Christian, but he doesn't live a sinless life, right? He may have differing opinions about Christian theology than what the actual what actual classical Christianity teaches, right? And also, of course, he is not an example to point you to. If you say, okay, Tony, what does Christianity teach? Then I'm going to say, look to the New Testament and look to the words of Jesus. If you want to know how you should live as a Christian, look to Jesus and try to emulate him in every way that you can. Now, right now, I can guarantee you that you won't, right? Because we are sinners. He is not. He was sinless. We are not. So, but he's the example, is the perfect example. Now, if we swap that to Muhammad, Muslims claim that he's the perfect man and the perfect Muslim. Okay, well, let's look how he lived. And if his actions and his lifestyle line up more with ISIS than, now again, not saying that he did the exact same thing that ISIS is doing now in every single way, but I'm just saying, who is the life of Muhammad closer to? Is his life closer to ISIS? Or is the life of Muhammad closer to your neighbor who works at Starbucks and says they're a Muslim and, reads the Quran here and there a little bit? They try to keep the 5 pillars if it's convenient for them. If they can't, then, oh, well. There are many moderate Muslims out there, just like there are many moderate Christians and nominal Christians, nominal Muslims. But who are the most sincere Muslims in that they are actually emulating Muhammad? That's what we need to ask. You can be sincere and believe something that's false, well, then you're just sincerely wrong, right? But if we look to Jesus as far as the model for Christians to follow, and we look to Muhammad as the model for Muslims to follow, then we don't need to look at anybody else. We don't need to look at my Christian neighbor or my Muslim neighbor. Now, regardless of what Jesus did and what Muhammad did, we should love all people. We should be sharing the gospel with all non-Christians. But this girl in that video, just like everybody else out there, they need to realize the difference between today's Muslims and what Islam, the religio-political system, actually says to do, the actual ideology and worldview of Islam. So people need to get educated. I keep saying that over and over again. At the same time, yes, we do need to love people and be sharing the gospel with them. But also, too, it doesn't really differentiate. There's this blurred line between hate speech and hate crimes to where they're being put into the same basket. Speech is words, whether it's written down or whether it's spoken. You can talk about what you love, you can talk about what you hate. But in America, there's freedom of speech, which means you can have whatever speech you want, as long as you aren't actually, threatening to go, hurt someone, kill somebody. And that is completely different than actually going and committing a hate crime. A hate crime, well, what if you go commit a crime, but you're not hating the person that you commit the crime against? It's like, so anyway, all these different terms need to be flushed out and just explained. And okay, let's define our terms. That's what a lot of people need to do. Let's define our terms, right? Because a lot of people are using the same terms but with different dictionaries. So we need to clean stuff up. But regardless of that, I have here from Barnabas Aid, hate crime is becoming a weapon to use against Christians. Hate crime against Christians is only slowly beginning to be recognized by the UK government, despite significant acts of violence being committed against Christians because of their faith. This was one of the main conclusions of evidence submitted by Barnabas Aid in December to an inquiry by the UK House of Commons Select Committee on Home Affairs. Our evidence identified 3 broad types of anti-Christian violence in the UK. 1, acts of violence against Christians arising from a general contempt for Christians held by some sections of society. This is broadly similar to some forms of anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred. 2, threats and sometimes actual acts of violence carried out against Christians and Christian property by a minority of gay rights extremists. For example, the arson and death threats received by the owners of Asher's Bakery in Belfast after they declined an order to bake a cake promoting the redefinition of marriage. And 3, attempts at forced reconversion back to Islam of Christians from Muslim family backgrounds. Such attempts may involve illegal imprisonment for days, weeks, or even months in a room or garage, extreme physical and emotional abuse, attempts to lure the person overseas where they may be subjected to similar forms of, quote, persuasion, and or forced marriage to a Muslim. Despite the widespread existence of such violence in organizations such as Barnabas Aid repeatedly raising this issue over many years, the UK Hate Crime Action Plan still does not even mention it. So, once again, this whole issue of hate crimes, hate speech, and making sure that we have a clear distinction between the two, between speech and action, because countries where they're just blurring this line, it's easily to outlaw both, and then hate speech all of a sudden becomes anything that you find offensive, which isn't very far from the schools of Sharia that say that slander is anything that a Muslim may find offensive. So hey, I don't like your haircut. Well, all of a sudden, I could be punished for that because I offended a Muslim. So offending a Muslim is just a little bit away, of course, from offending anybody. So offending people should not be a crime. Free speech, the freedom of speech, obviously is protecting speech people don't like. Why? Because you don't complain when I compliment your suit and tie or your dress, or I give you a compliment. You say, oh, thanks. You don't complain about it. You only complain and get mad when I say something that you don't like. That's why freedom of speech protects speech that can be considered hateful or whatever other term you want to give it. But that is what freedom of speech is about. Now, and also from Barnabas Aid, we have Islamists admit pressuring police to register blasphemy case against Indonesian Christian governor. I mentioned this guy a number of times in past shows. Here's the latest update from January 26th. As one of the prosecution's witnesses in the blasphemy, quote unquote, trial of Jakarta's Christian governor has admitted to threatening to potentially incite mob violence to get police to press charges. The secretary of an Islamic organization who reported Ahok to police for blasphemy, quote unquote, in September for an alleged anti-Islamic comment made online has admitted under cross-examination that he told police, quote, if they didn't file my report, thousands of Muslims would come to the police station. No compulsion in religion, no compulsion in, living how you want to live, believing what you want to believe, saying what you want to say. Well, no. Obviously, as we see here, there is compulsion towards the police themselves to press charges against this man. So continue to pray for him. And everything else that's happening around the world, I have here from express.co.uk, Sudanese sex attacker jailed for raping tourist after he was granted asylum. A Sudanese sex attacker has been jailed for raping a tourist outside a train station after he was granted asylum to stay in the UK. Salah Kubar, 20, threw the South Korean woman over the railings at West Dulwich Station and dragged her into the bushes to carry out his attack. And it's not just happening there. We have in Pakistan rising violence against Christian women in Egypt. This is from PakistanChristianPost.com. Christian girl Rania disappears in alleged kidnapping. The disappearance of a minor girl from her Christian family usually turns out to be an incident of kidnapping and forced conversion to Islam. 1 week into this year, a 17-year-old girl, Rania Eid Fauzi, was found missing from her family home in the village of Al-Khiati in the Al-Mania province of Upper Egypt. Family members of the missing girl filed a complaint with the local police that a Muslim male named Rabi Radi Naghi had taken their daughter against her will. So this was happening throughout the world, and it's interesting how the common similarity here is that it is a Muslim who is doing it. Now, saying that, I'm not demonizing all Muslims throughout the world. What I'm saying is, look at the Muslims who are committing these violent acts, and what is their worldview? Why are they doing it? Is it something that the earliest followers of Muhammad did? Is it something that Muhammad himself did? If it is, then we should still say that it's wrong, but at least not say, oh, well, yeah, they're not following Islam, that's why they're doing this stuff. Well, no, it's just like with ISIS. People say, oh, they're not Islamic because they're killing Muslims. Well, let's take ISIS out of the equation, and Sunnis and Shias have been killing each other for 1,400 years. So the whole complaint of, or excuse that they're not Islamic because they're killing Muslims, well, that's begging the question, number one, because you're assuming that they're Muslims, and that's exactly what ISIS and other jihadists would deny, saying, well, no, they're not Muslims, that's why we're killing them, and we're also killing Jews and Christians and everybody else who is not Muslim. Although Jews and Christians actually get the third choice, and that is dimitude, whereas, pagans or complete idolaters or people who are not Christians or Jews just have that, two-way street, convert or die. So Jews and Christians technically have a, third choice. But, still, this claim about no compulsion in religion, we see that there is definitely some compulsion to a degree. Now, from Breitbart, actually, let's move on here to WND. Here, Clockboy. If you don't know who this is, all you have to do is type in Clockboy online. This is going to be picture number 13. Clockboy gets clock cleaned in free speech victory. It says, we couldn't be more excited to stand up against such frivolous use of our court system. There's more trouble for Clockboy, Ahmed Mohammed, and his father, Mohammed Mohammed. They apparently will have to pay the attorney's fees, court costs, and, quote, other expenses of at least one of the personalities they sued when the youngster brought what looked like a bomb to his public school and was suspended. So this whole story goes back a ways, so you might not have heard of this guy, but for those of you who have, this is the latest update. This boy whose clocks are very bomb-like or bomb-looking is not really winning this case in any way. So it's interesting to continue to follow the story and see how it goes. Also from creepingsharia.wordpress.com, Phoenix, Arizona, becoming one of the biggest Muslim enclaves in the United States. It says the Phoenix metro area ranks as one of the U.S. cities with most residents from 7 Muslim-majority countries in President Donald Trump's immigration and refugee restriction order. Phoenix has 17,300 residents from one of the 7 countries in the controversial Trump order, according to the Brookings Institution. The executive order temporarily restricts immigration, refugees, and entry into the U.S. from Syria, Iraq, Somalia, Iran, Libya, Yemen, and Sudan. Los Angeles and Southern California as a whole has the most residents from the 7 countries. That includes the most Iranians, 136,000. They are 160,000. There are 160,800 people, banned country residents in the Los Angeles area. Detroit is second, followed by New York and San Diego. So please stay right where you are. We have a short commercial break, and we'll be right back with more Islam and the news.
We are excited to announce that we are now streaming on Apple TV, which provides high-quality television in HD. Be sure to type into the search bar on your Apple TV ABN SAT and download the app. you have any questions regarding installment, please call us at 248-416-1300 or visit our website at trinitychannel.com.
ABN viewers, to watch free reruns of our marathon shows, apologetic shows, and English programs, go to www.youtube.com and type Trinity Channel. Here at ABN, we make it easier for viewers like you to watch programs. For more information, call us at 248-416-1300.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Islam and the News right here on ABN's Trinity Channel every single Friday from 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, if you have friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, etc., who've never heard of Islam and the News, tell them to check it out live, and you can also find the archived shows on the Trinity Channel's YouTube channel, because, again, these are headlines that you will not hear in the mainstream media. Lindsay Lohan has enough of, quote, oppression, converts to Islam to stand in solidarity with Muslims. Yes, this is from conservativedailypost.com. As a nation rolls its eyes, Lindsay Lohan finds another way to embarrass decent Americans. The troubled star and Hollywood party girl has been appearing before photographers lately, wearing the Islamic hijab. The traditional Muslim headscarf is worn by women who follow fundamentalist versions of Islam, but it is shunned in Western countries as a symbol of oppressive patriarchy. Lohan has been better known for her off-screen antics than her sporadic film appearances. She is most famous for her role in the 2004 film Mean Girls, where she squeezed out the last few drops of her innocence to render a memorable performance. Again, that all of that I just said is from Conservative Daily Post. Moving on to Texas, the big, great state of Texas. This is from WND.com. Texas State reports ISIS is on our borders. There have been long reports of activity by Islamic terrorists just across the border from Texas and Mexico, that ISIS was setting up training camps in the region and that Muslim terrorists were infiltrating the U.S. throughout that region. It says now the state of Texas is issuing alarms about that very issue in its new Texas Public Safety Threat Overview, released just this month, noting that the state faces a, quote, full spectrum of threats, especially, quote, due to the recent actions of lone offenders or small groups affiliated with or inspired by the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria and other foreign terrorist organizations. We assess that the current terrorism threat to Texas is elevated. And of course, we have heard in the past that ISIS has talked about infiltrating the groups of refugees and making their way into America that way, which of course is a way that they could still do it, even with this whole thing about the immigration thing that's going on with Trump. Well, I mean, people who are breaking the law aren't going to follow a new law. So if people are already trying to cross the border illegally, well, they're still going to do that. And perhaps ISIS is going to revert to just sticking with that only. But from Daniel Pipes has written Smoking Out Islamists Via Extreme Vetting. This is from danielpipes.org. Donald Trump issued an executive order on January 27th establishing radically new procedures to deal with foreigners who apply to enter the United States. Building on his earlier notion of, quote, extreme vetting, the order explains that to protect Americans, the United States must ensure that those admitted to this country do not bear hostile attitudes toward it and its founding principles, Constitution, Bill of Rights. The United States, I just added that, it doesn't say that. Constitution and Bill of Rights. The United States cannot and should not admit those who do not support the Constitution. Oh, there you go. Or those who would place violent ideologies over American law. In addition, the United States should not admit those who engage in acts of bigotry or hatred, including, quote, honor killings, other forms of violence against women, or the persecution of those who practice religions different from their own, or those who would oppress Americans of any race, gender, or sexual orientation. Now, if you are not aware, Sharia is not compatible with the United States Constitution, and that's why Donald Trump has a problem with Sharia and anyone who wants to come to America and to any degree be part of the equation of bringing America and the West as a whole under Sharia. From WND.com, I have establishment in full meltdown over Trump refugee orders. We will fight this Islamophobic and dangerous proposal. It says President Donald Trump signed an executive order Friday that will pause the resettlement of third world refugees in the United States for 120 days while a system of, quote, extreme vetting is put in place. With a stroke of a pen, Trump set off a firestorm of criticism from the media, the religious establishment, business leaders, and especially those in the business of resettling refugees. The volunteer agencies, or VOLAGs, which get paid by the government to resettle refugees, stand to lose millions of dollars in federal grants during the 120 days they sit idle. So now we know a big reason why, or the main reason, why a lot of people, especially those, who are getting paid from this activity, are upset because, hey, less money for them, right? So it comes back to the whole money thing, right? Follow the money. Also from gatewaypundit.com, I have Muslims hold mass prayer protest at JFK Airport. Allahu Akbars were yelled, and they threaten biggest uprising. It says hundreds of Muslims held a mass prayer demonstration today, and this was February 3rd, about the demonstration at JFK International Airport in New York City. It says the Muslim protesters pulled out their prayer rugs and gave speeches in the parking lot of Terminal Number 4. They effectively shut down the traffic in the area for the protest. The Muslims have a speaker system to blast their Friday prayers at the New York airport. One Muslim speaker threatened biggest uprising, quote unquote, and resistance, quote unquote, if things don't change. Last week, President Trump issued a temporary refugee travel ban from seven terrorist states. So as much as people are saying, hey, this is a Muslim ban, if you are not aware, Muslim is not a nationality. So someone not liking Islam doesn't make them racist. If they don't like Muslims, they're not racist because Islam is not a race. Being a Muslim is not a race. There are white Muslims, there are Asian Muslims, there are black Muslims, there are white Muslims. So Islam is a religion, not a race. So the term racism doesn't even make sense. And also bigot too. Bigot is basically saying that someone has unfairly judged someone else based on, race, religion, whatever. But it's the ball is in your court to ask, well, why? How are you're being unfair? And then that person saying, well, how am I being unfair? You have to tell that person how they are being unfair. But if they have studied Islamic theology, Islamic history, Islamic philosophy, the Islamic worldview, they are going to know better than your average American who doesn't know anything about Islam, other than, hey, my neighbor, I love him. My coworker, I love him. He's a Muslim, so Islam must be, very peaceful because this guy is peaceful. Separate the person and their actions from the ideology. If the ideology matches up with their actions, okay, well then they are more strictly following Islamic teachings than Muslims who do not strictly follow those teachings. So again, that's a totally different equation than what people are bringing up all the time. Now, from Al-Alam, it says a third of Americans think Trump's travel ban is going to make them safer. Imposing a temporary travel ban on citizens from 7 Muslim countries, President Donald Trump said the move would help protect the United States from terrorism. But less than 1/3 of Americans believe the move makes them more safe, according to a Reuters Ipsos opinion poll released on Tuesday. So some Americans feel safer, some Americans do not. But again, you need to ask these people, why do you feel safer? Why do you not feel safer? Obviously, those questions were not taken into consideration here. Now, from Al Arabia, we have Saudi travel plans not affected by Trump ban. Entry procedures for the Saudi citizens during the past few days were normal and no problems were reported. Saudis traveling to the U.S. have not been negatively affected by the executive decision of President Trump to ban citizens of 7 Muslim countries from entering the United States for 90 days. an official Saudi source was quoted in local press are saying. And a lot of people are concerned about that. People who have studied Islam and studied Islamic history, they're asking, hey, if Saudi Arabia, people from Saudi Arabia have committed so many atrocities, not only in their own country, but terrorist attacks in America, why wasn't Saudi Arabia put on the list? So there are a number of people who are still asking this question, and it'll be interesting if we hear an answer to that, if we do, and when we do. From Al Jazeera, Abdullah bin Zayed, Trump's travel ban not Islamophobic. Abdullah bin Zayed says President Trump's order affecting citizens of Muslim-majority countries is not Islamophobic. The United Arab Emirates foreign minister has said that the U.S. President Donald Trump's travel ban on citizens of 7 mainly Muslim countries, which has triggered global outrage, is not Islamophobic and does not target any one religion. So this man from the UAE is saying, well, no, it's not Islamophobic. Continuing on with the same narrative, I have from Top Right News, liberal heads explode after these Muslim Trump supporters nuke airport protesters. It says, after President Trump signed an executive order, and again, talking about the 7 countries, says Democrats and the entire liberal media complex immediately called the order a, quote, Muslim ban, a narrative Trump himself strongly rejected in a statement released on Sunday. But IJ Review decided to reach out to some American Muslim conservatives about Trump's order. We asked them if they felt the protests were justified and how they felt overall about the narrative of Trump being a, quote, racist commander-in-chief. What they learned is not going to please these Soros-funded sock puppets protesting President Trump. Now, listen to the quotes that I'm going to read to you for each of these 4 people. We have Jay Smith. She says that these people really want to make a difference if they can become mommies and daddies in refugee camps in Syria or Iraq. They can become mommies and daddies in refugee camps in Syria or Iraq. Spend time with the people who truly are in need of help. For years, President Obama bombed countries in the Middle East and didn't see them protesting. It's incredibly hypocritical to be doing what they're doing now. And they cry racism. As a Muslim American, I've never missed any opportunities because of my ethnic background, religion, or skin color. I'd have just as much of a chance as any white American or any American in general. So has my family. I refuse to believe that I'm a minority as well. Here in America, everyone is granted the same chance of the American dream. The case would be different if I was in, say, Iraq or Syria. Kareem Al-Sayed says, it's not a Muslim ban. If it was really a Muslim ban, he would have banned immigration from Indonesia, the country with the highest population of Muslims. The 7 countries listed were in Obama's Terrorist Travel Prevention Act. The protesters are not concerned. And if so, we have seen the protesting Obama's drone strike. Have you seen them protesting Obama's drone strikes and Obama making it more difficult for some Muslims to make it into this country? There isn't an actual basis for these protests. It's more political than anything else, pushing a narrative and being upset that a Republican is in the White House. Jazzy Ray says, first of all, it's not a Muslim ban. And I think that the policy that's been put into action should have been in place during the Obama administration. If anything, it's time to put Americans first in this country. The protests are ridiculous. They aren't accomplishing anything. These people are just trying to cause a scene. They are not there with a purpose. If they want to make some kind of impact, it won't help in the streets. They should donate to an organization that supports the refugees, or they should start their own organization to lift up and help these people. But nothing of that sort is being done. Last but not least, we have U.S. Army veteran Mohammed Shakar. He says, as long as they're not violent, I don't care about people protesting. Protest all you want. These protests are stupid, though. It's hypocritical that they didn't protest all of Obama's action in the Middle East. I was concerned for a moment because there wasn't a provision for green card holders, but that was later fixed. Then he says, then Shakar used some personal experience to make a point. He says, I served in Iraq. I helped train Iraqi soldiers, and not everyone was trustworthy. I remember an Iraqi officer who was trying to get me to tell him where a sensitive location was. A lot of our equipment was in that location. He told me he would pay me if he could sell the equipment on the black market. There were complaints from soldiers that officers were taking weapons and equipment from us and selling it, and we don't know who they were sold to. As a result, they weren't leaving enough weapons or equipment for their soldiers. So I couldn't understand why there could be questions about where people's loyalty lies. So much for the monolithic, quote, anti-Muslim narrative the mainstream media tries to stick to President Trump. These Muslim supporters are not buying it. From Bare Naked Islam, if you have any doubt that Trump's ban on certain Muslim countries is the right thing to do, this will remove it. Stephen Gurn is an American working in Iraq. Remember his words when your leftist friends start bashing Trump's temporary ban. The only thing you should be asking is why isn't the ban permanent? So let's watch this next video.
What's going on? I just wanted to take a minute and reach out to everybody and talk about a certain subject that came up the other morning, and I think people should know about it. Obviously, I don't work over in the United States. I work overseas, and I'm currently in Iraq, which is one of the countries that were on the list. And there's been a lot of discussion about the executive order. Obviously, in the United States, there's lots going on, and over here, there's a lot going on as well. Just a lot of things you all don't see. So the other morning, we were having a discussion on the executive order, and a lot of the Iraqis obviously showed their displeasure in this executive order, and why they feel like they've been betrayed by the United States and so on. Now, I'm not here to get into a discussion with you about policies or this or that or anything like that. I just want to talk to you and make a comment about the discussion I actually had with these gentlemen. So I listened to what they had to say, and after they were done, yelling and screaming about their opinion on things, I asked a simple question, and I got an answer to that simple question, and I got it without hesitation. My simple question was, as an American, if I went out in town right now, would I be welcome? And they instantly said, absolutely not, you would not be welcome. And I said, okay, so what would happen if I went out in town? And they said, the locals would snatch me up and kill me within an hour. I'd be tortured first, and after they were done torturing me, I'd probably be beheaded. It would, go on video for everybody to see as, an example. And so I already knew this was going to happen, but I wanted to hear it from them. And, the point I'm trying to make is, this is the local populace that would do this. This isn't ISIS. This isn't Al-Qaeda. This isn't the PMU. This isn't a militia from the Iranians or anything like that. This is the local populace that would do this. So my question to them was pretty simple then after that. If you would do this to me in your country, why would I let you in my country? Because all this means to me is that if you have the opportunity to take the life of an American, you would do it. So maybe that's something you all need to think about back there. If this is the way some of these cultures feel, this is the way that these countries feel about Americans, why would you be so naive to believe that if they came to the United States, they would do anything any different than what they would do right here in their own country? I don't know, man. Just trying to inform you about what's actually happening on the ground in one of the banned countries. Something you should probably think about. I can't go out in town here. Why should they go out inside of my country?
So that's one perspective, from an American who is living in Iraq and working in Iraq. Something to keep in the back of our minds. Now, I know there are some Muslims out there who are just breaking the 10th commandment, you shall not covet, because you saw that guy's beard. So try to put that aside from actually thinking about what that guy said, because it is important to know that, especially people here in America, to know that as well. Now, moving on to Canada, this is, of course, a big, huge news story. We're going to be moving right into Canada. I have here first from dailycaller.com, Canada inching toward Islamophobia law. If you hadn't heard about this, Canada is inching towards a broadly based law that would codify Islamophobia as a hate crime without even defining Islamophobia or demonstrating that it is a phenomenon requiring legal action. Right there, folks, perfect example of, like I told you, this blurred line between speech and action and not differentiating between the two. Obviously, Canada is not heading in the right direction. Where are you going to head, America? Are you going to follow in Canada's footsteps, or are you going to learn from their mistakes? And moving on from that, still in Canada, from CBC.ca, Montreal police charge Kirkland man accused of online hate speech targeting Muslims. Another example. They are criminalizing speech, words that come out of your mouth. We need to make a distinction between that and actions with everyone out there, our friends, neighbors, everybody. Speech is one thing, action's another thing. Yes, hate crimes are wrong. We should condemn hate crimes, especially against people because of their race, religion, ethnicity, whatever. But speech is another thing. So America, there's freedom of speech. If you don't know where the free speech zone is in America, let me show you real quick. Let's get a picture up there. There we go. Okay, that is the free speech zone in America. So you can say what you want to say, right? And speech is different than action. If you offend someone, well, then you get offended. You don't have the right to not be offended here in America. But don't cross that line and get into the actions. Now, what happened about this whole mosque attack thing? We see a news story in Quebec City, the radio waves, they're trying to say, hey, we need to cut back what we're talking about and all other stuff. Now, you heard about this young man who is the perpetrator, according to the mainstream media. I do want to share a video with you real quick, though. It's an informative video, and this video I want you to add with all the information that you have and check it out. Let's go ahead and play this video for you right now.
6 men slaughtered, killed in cold blood while peacefully praying at their local mosque. This week's mass murder in Quebec City sent shockwaves, not just across Canada, but the whole world. Irrespective of political stripe or profession of faith, there is a categorical acceptance of the fact that this attack, it ought to be investigated, prosecuted, punished, and wholly condemned. For many, there is a certain satisfaction in knowing the sole suspect, Alexandre Bissonnette, is behind bars, facing 11 charges of first-degree and attempted murder. But for others, questions still remain, questions about facts that are less categorical than the condemnation of this attack. Why one narrative was altogether deleted and replaced by another. A full 12 hours after the attack, the official media narrative involved not one, but 2 suspects who allegedly yelled Allahu Akbar while carrying out their rampage. Witnesses were interviewed. They said that they were inside the mosque at the time of the attack. All of them alleged the same. 2 assailants opening fire, shouting Allahu Akbar. As of Monday morning, Canada's state broadcaster, the CBC, conducted interviews with several witnesses, all of which corroborated that story.
Certain, there were 2 people. They were masked and they shouted Allah Akbar.
Yes, ma'am.
Just over 13 hours after the attack, police forces from every level held a joint press conference and said that they had 2 suspects in their custody.
At about 7:50, we received many calls from 2017 Chemin Sainte-Foy, the cultural center, telling us that shots had been fired. Very quickly, police were on site and have arrested 1 suspect. At about 8:10 in the evening, the second suspect gets in touch through 911. He mentions that he is armed, and he'd like to speak to us. At this point in the investigation, we can say that the individuals are unknown to police forces. This is a methodology for investigations, and we don't want to reveal the identity of the two suspects as they are presently being investigated. We know that these are individuals who wanted to put fear into the public. They're involved in violent activity. Do you know whether these two suspects were working alone, or are there any others with them? Well, for the moment, nothing indicates to us that there was anybody else involved.
So, several hours after the attack, police confirmed that they held a man who was later identified as Mohammed Belkader, a 29-year-old engineering student at Laval University, in their custody, and that they were indeed treating him as a suspect. But only a few hours later, Belkader's role in the attack, well, it shifted from a suspect who attempted to flee the scene to a Good Samaritan who was providing first aid to the victims when he was wrongfully accused by police. But one consideration of just how many CCTV cameras are in place around the mosque begs the question: when did police review the footage, and why did it take them over 12 hours to determine that Bissonnette was their sole suspect? Bissonnette, a man that police say turned himself in just after the attack. They say that he was willing to cooperate with police, which begs yet another question. If he's willing to cooperate, why has he yet to reveal his motive? But the mainstream media couldn't be bothered to ask the tough questions, quickly obsessed with a narrative based on a few likes on Bissonnette's Facebook page. The discovery that Bissonnette liked two of the most popular politicians on earth, Donald Trump and France's Marine Le Pen, well, it quickly transformed the narrative into a story about a young right-wing extremist committing a terrorist act, even if no terror charges have been laid. Bissonnette's Facebook likes of the federal NDP party and Jack Layton pages, well, they received virtually no media attention. State broadcasters and high-ranking politicians, well, they quickly jumped on the new narrative, condemning the so-called normalization of hate, and even blaming newly minted President Donald J. Trump for the attack. Canada's state broadcaster quickly shifted its narrative. By the evening news, there was absolutely no mention of witness reports that involved Allahu Akbar and two suspects. Instead, they were running with their new alternative facts.
Prayers were just wrapping up when someone burst in and opened fire.
J'ai entendu, fuck you, toc, 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 toc.
This man says he saw and heard what he believes was the gunman.
J'ai eu peur, je savais pas ce qui se passait.
I was scared, he says. I didn't know what was going on.
The CBC even tracked down the former suspect, Mohammed Belkader, and despite the fact that his name was a matter of public record by the time that they interviewed him, well, they went through great pains not to reveal his name, not to reveal his face, and they even scratched his voice.
But investigators later said only one of the men is a suspect. The other is a witness who fled the scene in fear. Radio-Canada spoke with him today and agreed to protect his identity.
J'ai vu une image d'une personne qui porte un arme. Je n'étais pas conscient que c'était d'un policier.
He says he saw a man with a gun, thought it was the shooter and ran, but it was police.
Unlike cases of Islamic extremism, there was no apparent journalistic endeavor to determine whether or not mental illness played a role. Instead, media outlets quoted friends and neighbors who described Bissonnette as a polite and introverted individual from a good family. Classmates at Laval, even ones who debated politics with Bissonnette, described him as someone who wasn't at all hateful. One home video even seems to suggest that Bissonnette was something of a conscientious environmentalist.
So, first of all, I'd like to start by saying that around 350 million people have no access to water in the world. And every year, about 3.5 million of those people actually die. So, as I support people that have ALS, and as I support the fight against this terrible disease, I think we should not forget the fact that this is really, what this is wasting water. And so this is why I'll be doing my special ALS bucket challenge. I've modified it a little bit, and you'll see in a moment.
But again, no details of Bissonnette's personal life led the media to ask any additional questions as to what could drive an individual to commit such a heinous act. Without police reports on a possible motive, why hasn't the mainstream media been considering things other than Islamophobia? Is there any relation, say, between one of the victims, who was a professor at the University of Laval, and the university student who allegedly committed this act? Or even the other university student who is now set free? Well, just because the mainstream media refuses to dig any deeper doesn't mean that we at The Rebel will stop asking the tough questions. I contacted Laval University and asked if either Alexandre Bissonnette or Mohamed Belkader ever took a class with the slain professor. I'm still awaiting the university's response. And after numerous emails to Quebec's police media relations contacts, I visited their headquarters, but was turned away without an interview. There very well could be plausible answers to all of the questions I have just posed about the possible relationship between victims and perpetrator, about the CCTV footage, and why one narrative was altogether scrapped and replaced with another. These are valid questions, and frankly, someone needs to ask them. And I'm sure that the answers are out there. I, for one, would like to hear them. For the Rebel.media, I'm Faith Goldie.
You can find what really happened at the Grand Mosque in Quebec City. The answer to that question and the article and that video are found at gatesofvienna.net. Again, more information to add in. Of course, our heart does go out to the families of the people who were killed. We pray that they would be comforted by people around them. Christians, reach out to them. But it's also our desire that they would repent and put their trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, because there will not be peace until people come to know the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ the Lord. So, with that said, thank you for being with us. We'll be back next Friday with more Islam and the news. God bless you and good night.